What's up, guys? This is Coach Grant with First Down Training, and today we're going to be breaking down how wide receivers can run a perfect fade route. So we are literally going to be breaking down how to run a deep fade route versus every single type of coverage, zone, man, the works. So I hope this video helps you guys out. But also, fellas, if you're a wide receiver and you would like to train with us this offseason, we are traveling out to 15 states across the country for 2-day-long QB and wide receiver training camps. So next up, we will be coming out to San Francisco, then Orlando, Florida, New Orleans, Charlotte, Dallas, the DMV, St. Louis, Honolulu, Boston, Cleveland, Austin, Seattle, Newark, Denver, and Los Angeles, fellas. So check out that very first link below if we're coming to a city near you and you would like to get some work in with us for 2 days. Let's get started with this video. So now, first thing we're going to be talking about is how you would run a fade ball versus outside shade zone coverage. So if you got to run a fade, let's say maybe it's cover 3, right? There's an option that you could get that ball on a fade ball if it's cover 3. One high safety, maybe the quarterback likes the matchup. How do you get separation against this specific look? And you would use something called a vertical set. Now, this is a clip here from Christian Watson. Everybody loves to hate on him for this clip because he ends up dropping the pass. Now, if he didn't drop this pass here, this route would have been used by every single receiver page, every single receiver trainer, quote unquote, because this is exactly how you would want to run the route. You just obviously got to finish, but we can learn from the route as a wide receiver. Sometimes we just got to catch the ball. Everybody's had this experience before. So when we have outside shade zone, so many times I talk about with routes that you want to take what the DB gives you. But on a fade, sometimes it's very difficult. Sometimes it's very difficult on a fade when he's outside shade and zone to take an inside release. Because when he's outside shade and zone, what does he have to the inside? He's got safety help, right? That's the whole reason he's outside shade in the first place. He does not want you to go run the fade. So what you have to do is you have to threaten this inside shoulder and try to make him think you're running a post. So what Watson does is he comes out here, he attacks him, he closes the distance, but he throws this move to the inside called a vertical set. So that is essentially just a hard step to the inside. You got to sell with your hips. You got to sell with your shoulders. Everything should be going to the inside to get that DB to think post. Because when we get him to drive on the post, because at the end of the day, fellas, zone coverage turns into man. Right? Like if he has no threats to his zone, which in cover 3 would be the deep third, he's probably going to run with you on this post if he doesn't have any threats there. Like if there's a wheel underneath, he's probably going to let you go because that wheel's going to his zone. But if there's no threats, he's probably going to run with you. So that's what we want to sell. If like we're running a fade and then like the slot receiver's running a post, there ain't nobody in his zone. He's going to be running with you. So that's what we want to sell. They call it a vertical set. You could definitely think of it like a rocker step where it's a 1-2, but it's a hard sell to the inside, hips and shoulders sell, make him think post, so now I can slip behind him and I have some space to actually slip behind him. Because on a fade ball, the quarterback needs room to fade you out. And if you don't give him that space, if you just try to run around him, you are going to get locked up every time. So many wide receivers will come off against this look. They got outside shade, and they'll just try to go run around the guy. This DB is taught, do not give up the outside. He will squeeze you to the sideline, and you'll have maybe a yard, if you're lucky, to run that fade, and the quarterback will not give you the ball. I can guarantee you that. So let's play this full speed. Obviously, we got to finish with the catch. Obviously, we need to have that. But this is exactly how you would want to run the ball or run this route. You just got to finish. So now, how would I run a fade versus inside shade zone coverage? So this is honestly kind of the same thing. When it's zone coverage, it's pretty much the same idea when you're running a fade. You want to close the distance, and you want to threaten inside. There's just a different reason you would want to do this against inside shade because you're attacking his like leverage, if you will. So let's come out here. So he's running this like inside stem, vertical set, same idea, but now this gives him space to the outside. So it's the same idea. But if you were here and you got inside shade coverage and zone, it's kind of this, like honestly, like it's very similar when it's zone, when you're running a fade. If you were to just take off and go run to the outside, when this DB's inside shade, that's exactly what he wants you to do. He wants you to just run outside because he's inside shade for a reason. He's trying to protect the inside. Whether it's off man, whether it's zone, he probably doesn't have much help to the inside. So if you just take off and run, that's exactly where he wants you to go. His help is the sideline. So what we have to do is we have to threaten him where he doesn't want me to go, which would be obviously be the inside. If he's an inside leverage, we want to threaten his leverage. Always, always. So on the fade ball, what does he do? He attacks his leverage with his stem. He's closing the distance, and he uses that same vertical set. Hard jab to the inside, hips and shoulders committed, get that DB to crash. And now guess what? We got plenty of space to the sideline for that QB to throw me open. If that ball was maybe thrown upfield by a couple steps and not underthrown, that might be a touchdown. But End of the day, it's a catch, it's a completion, it's a big play, but that is how you would set up that route. Inside shade zone or inside shade off man. Let's go attack his leverage. Let's create more space for me to the outside on this fade route. That vertical set is a great move to use anytime you have off coverage and you are running that fade route. Great job there by Drake London, threatening the leverage and then winning back to the outside. Okay, so now this next example is going to be, well, these next two examples, I should say, is going to be about outside shade press. So I want to talk to you about something called an MOR. So what is an MOR? An MOR is a must outside release. Some people call it a mandatory outside release. It means the exact same thing. But when you have outside shade press, usually it means one of two things. Maybe it's man coverage, right? Maybe it's man and he's just got like safety help to the inside and your wide receiver and your split is cut down. Or it's cover two. So if it's cover two, that means he's outside shade. You got a safety who's playing like the deep half, and he's trying to funnel you inside to the safety, and he's going to sit and play the flats. So if you have a play call where it's like a fade, and then you have like a 10-yard out or a 5-yard out or something to the flats, usually they will tell this wide receiver that you have an MOR, mandatory outside release. So that type of fade, you obviously got outside release. You can't do your own thing out there. So let's play this full speed. So he goes here, DeAndre Hopkins, and he kind of gives a little hesitation, but he's able to get to the outside. Like that is the definition of a mandatory outside release. It's not pretty. Sometimes you're going to have a DB who's right on your hip. Sometimes you're going to be right on the sideline. But you have to go outside to try to get this DB and pull him out of there. Now, you see how we know that this is probably cover two. Obviously, that this safety is working over the top. And obviously, this DB's got his eyes to the number two to see if there are any threats to the flat. If this DB were here, and let's say the slot receiver was running a 5-yard out, that DB would sit on it, Hopkins would be open right in that hole shot, and the quarterback would put it on a line. Now, I don't know exactly why the quarterback threw this thing over the top, especially into double coverage, but maybe he just trusts his guy and he knows he's going to come down with that type of catch, which is a great play. But that's why he did that. That's why he forced the outside release, because this was a mandatory outside release play. So now this next example we're going to look at here is when you would take the inside release. Because if you're familiar with this page at all, you've probably heard me say, if you're running a route, it's based off the DB's leverage on how you structure your routes, right? If he's outside shade, you want to take the inside release, take what he gives you. The only exception is when it's an MOR. But this situation, however, is not. So if you have to run a fade and it's like a 4 verts concept, it don't matter if you take an inside release, it don't matter if you take an outside release. You just have to be able to get that stacked position where you're over the top and he's trailing your hip. And that comes down to knowing what to do with your release and knowing how to take what the DB gives you. So let's watch Evan Stewart right here. What does he do? He attacks the leverage of the DB and takes the inside release on the fade. Has him stacked. He's got him by a step. Ball was underthrown because the quarterback was getting pressured, but that's exactly how you want to play this thing. You don't have to force the outside release. You can attack his leverage. Let's make him think we're doing the outside release. So that's what Stewart does. He attacks the leverage, gives him a move outside. We get the DB to jump. So now let's go hip to hip with him. Let's restack. Because if you're able to restack a DB with an inside release, that is no different than restacking a DB with an outside release. You just have to take what the DB gives you. So against outside shade press, it depends on what kind of fade it is, right? MOR, you got to go outside. You got to force it. But if it's outside shade press and you can do the inside release or an outside release, they don't tell you. If he's outside shade, attack him and take what he gives you. That's exactly what Stewart does. Great job closing the distance and great job working to restack to win on that fade ball. So now, this next example of this fade route is what do you do when you have a fade and it's like inside shade catch technique? So catch technique is what? That's when you have about maybe 2 yards of space, like 1.5, 2 yards of space. Usually sometimes when you're off the ball, it may seem like more with the DB. So he's essentially catching you and he wants you to try to just run around him so he could get hands. So like what he's hoping Diggs does right here, he's running a fade. What he's hoping he does is inside shade a little bit. Catch technique is that he'll just see that and he'll just try to go run around him. But if you just try to run to the outside against that, DB will get hands and squeeze you to that sideline, just like we were talking about against zone. So we have to close the cushion with him and threaten his leverage, which is to the inside, obviously. So that's what Diggs does. He comes off the ball, closes cushion, gives him a move inside, and that allows him to get that outside release and have some space. So, and again, you see he's lined up on the bottom of the numbers too. So DB's going to be inside shade because he's expecting an inside route. That's even better for us. But Diggs doesn't try to run around. He closes space because, fellas, when you close the space with the DB and you try to step on his toes almost, that makes him uncomfortable. Anytime that you have that catch technique, you're running a post, you're running a dig, a fade, you got to close distance. We cannot just try to run around this guy. Because if Diggs comes off the ball here, and like let's say he closes distance with the DB, but like let's say he makes his move back here. Even if we get the DB to jump inside, he still has to go vertical. And that's an easy recovery for the DB because we're not hip to hip with him. That is why we want to close the distance. If I close the distance and I give him a move to the inside, when I burst up on the restack, if I beat that outside arm, I'm hip to hip with him. And then when I'm hip to hip, that puts me in a position where now he can be trailing me. If Diggs wanted to run a comeback here, he could easily get to a restack position and run a comeback. Well, maybe not a comeback. That wouldn't be the best example. Maybe an out route. Let's say out route. He would get to that restack position, give a move, and run it out if he wanted to because he stayed skinny. Now, because it's a fade route, all he needs is a couple steps, and that quarterback could put that thing on a dime, and that's what gets that separation. Close space, make him uncomfortable so I could have a tight restack and run a quarterback-friendly route. Let's play this thing again, full speed one more time. Great job at Diggs closing the space, threatening inside, and showing us how you can win against catch technique inside shade on that fade ball. All right, fellas, really want to thank you for watching. Really appreciate it. If you guys have any questions at all, don't hesitate. Leave those in the comment section below. Always great to hear from you guys. And if you'd like to get some work in with us this off season, traveling out to 15 different states. So check out that very first link below. I'll see you guys next time.